Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu is in theaters right now. The story starts in this movie, but it actually will be resolved in next summer's big screen adaptation of The Book of Boba Fett. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with my review of The Mandalorian and Grogu, which began its preview screenings earlier today. I went to see the movie as early as I could, ran back here, wrote up my review, recorded it, and now hopefully you're watching it. This Star Wars spinoff is written by Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, and Noah Floor, whose credits include The Mandalorian and The Book of Boba Fett, the TV shows, and it's directed by Jon Favreau, his first theatrical film since 2019's The Lion King. Star Wars itself has also been out of theaters since 2019 and the release of The Rise of Skywalker, and in the past, anytime there was a significant layoff between theatrical live-action Star Wars films, the return of those movies heralded something significant, like a new trilogy. But The Mandalorian and Grogu doesn't really seem to herald that much, other than the franchise's final transformation from making must-see theatrical events to more grist for the content mill. Pedro Pascal returns, definitely in voice form, occasionally in body, and briefly in face, to play the Mandalorian himself, Din Djarin, who is now a lot less morally gray than when we first met him. He's working for the New Republic to hunt down the remaining vestiges of the Empire, where many former officers have turned into warlords, offering meager protection in exchange for money. Alongside him is Christmas 2019's hottest toy, Grogu, the even smaller version of Yoda, who is still, I have to admit it, adorable. The movie starts off on a promising note as we see just how lethally effective Mando is as he infiltrates a snowy warlord's base, eventually battling a trio of fearsome AT-ATs. I actually loved the opening of this film because it introduces to non-show watchers just how skilled Mando is at what he does and just how adorable Grogu is, and it teases for people who might have already seen the show just how scaled up this version of The Mandalorian might be for the big screen. From there, however, The Mandalorian and Grogu just sort of drifts through a series of events, usually revolving around whether a litany of monsters is going to kill the Mandalorian, Grogu, or both. It's pretty easy to figure out that the odds of that happening are slim to none. There are some new characters in the movie, like Sigourney Weaver's Colonel Ward, Mando's handler at the New Republic, who's not such a bad pilot herself. Martin Scorsese also voices an intergalactic food truck owner, a cameo that will leave you going, huh? And okay, I guess. But this is also the first film to hit theaters since Dave Filoni's ascension to Chief Creative Officer at Lucasfilm, which was followed by his promotion to co-president of Lucasfilm earlier this year. And if you've been following Star Wars under Filoni's watch, then you'll know that one of his main goals is to incorporate as many animated characters from the shows that he did for Star Wars into live action as humanly possible. Those characters include Zeb Orrelios, a New Republic ally of Mando's, the bounty hunter Embo, who debuted in the Clone Wars, and most notably Rada the Hutt, who was rescued as a baby in the Clone Wars movie back in 2008, and has now grown into a gladiatorial force to be reckoned with, turning his back on the Hutt legacy of crime and not working out, I guess. Jeremy Allen White voices Rada the Hutt in a performance that I can definitively say features him speaking words written for him on paper. The inclusion of all these animated characters probably delights a certain part of the fan base, the hardcore Star Wars fans, maybe a lot of the younger fans who grew up with the Clone Wars and Rebels, and for a lot of older fans who maybe kept their watching more to the movie side of things, it probably leaves us, and I'll include myself, I'm a certified old, a little bit confused, mainly because it seems to me like Filoni is trying to legitimize and justify animated series that seemed very legitimate and justified by fans of the shows themselves, even people that didn't watch them. Those shows already have good reputations. But the big question I've always had about this movie is, why now? Why make this movie 6.5 years after The Mandalorian debuted on Disney Plus as its flagship show, and over 3 years after the last season of The Mandalorian wrapped up? I had hoped that the movie would deliver an answer to that question, would prove itself as a pivotal moment in storytelling that necessitated a transfer to the big screen. I've been a doubter of Star Wars movies in the past, like Rogue One, and even shows like Andor, that proved me wrong. And there have been TV shows in the past, like The X-Files, that have used a trip to movie theaters in order to execute plot points and do things that they couldn't really do on television. Instead, I walked out of the theater thinking that the best time to make this movie, if you are going to make this movie, was probably 2021 or 2022, when The Mandalorian was still white hot, when Grogu was more of a novelty, and when audiences may have been more excited to leave streaming behind and to go see this in theaters. Instead, what this movie does with The Mandalorian is, for me, the completion of a cycle that it had already started on Disney+. The Mandalorian started out as something really cool and unique, which stood out in the Star Wars universe. It was something that fans could really get excited about. Its second season still had a lot of that, but also started to incorporate a broader franchise mythology that I think watered down the central relationship. Then the season 2 cliffhanger was resolved for some reason in the middle of a different show, and season 3 became less of a central story and more of an amalgam of different characters that the franchise wanted to reintroduce, which excited some people but frustrated a lot of others. And now with the movie, The Mandalorian has completed its transformation from a show that reignited a lot of people's love of Star Wars to maybe the most forgettable, disposable thing that Star Wars has ever made. It certainly is on the big screen. Even the look of the film, from cinematographer David Klein, whose past 3 credits are all Star Wars shows on Disney+, says, yeah, you may as well just wait and watch this at home, when you have time. Star Wars movies have made me feel a lot of different things in the past. They've exhilarated me, they've frustrated me, they've left me in awe, they've left me angry, they've left me with a lot of mixed feelings. But I can't think of a movie that left me as completely just disinterested as this movie. Not even Solo back in 2018, which was a movie I wasn't a huge fan of, but which was able to get me a little bit more passionate about it than this one even was. It's not that the movie is bad, it's just there. Sometimes it felt like I was watching one of the scenes that you watch at Disney World or Disneyland on a Star Wars ride before you walk into the next room and get on the actual ride. Sometimes it felt like I was watching an actual movie, but walking out of the theater, it felt like I was at the end of a long required corporate training video. The thing that was going through my head the most was, okay, well, that's done. What's next? This did not feel to me like a passion project for anyone involved, in front of or behind the camera. I'm sure it was, but it didn't feel like it. It felt like the franchise's Alamo, the fallback position, because Lucasfilm felt like they needed to put a movie in theaters and all the other options had fallen through. I think it might have been better for the franchise to not have done this movie, to wait until next summer, where Starfighter is on the schedule, which has a lot more new to offer audiences, and for them to have moved on with The Mandalorian Season 4, which was apparently the plan and was heavy in development until that plan was scrubbed and this movie was made instead. What I will say is that this movie did not, to me, feel like 3 or 4 episodes of The Mandalorian strung together. I've seen that reaction out there. I try to avoid it for movies I haven't seen, but when I see them later, sometimes I will see a stray thought here or there. Jon Favreau has said that this is not what the planned Season 4 of Mandalorian would have been, and I believe him. I take him at his word on that. What it does feel like is the product of a team that was tasked with making a Mandalorian movie with no solid idea of what that movie should be. It doesn't really shake things up, it doesn't change anything, and it doesn't tell a story that feels compelling enough to say, yes, this needed to be its own film. I'm sure that the movie's defenders will say that this film does move the story of The Mandalorian and Grogu along, and there is one progression in their relationship that you could categorize as major, or at least significant, but it doesn't really change the status quo that much. And even that part of the story, which unfolds in a sequence that felt very long in the theater, probably would have worked if it had been a lyrical slowdown after over an hour of really exciting action. But for me, it was a slowdown in a movie that hadn't really excited me that much, which just made it feel slow. I know it seems like I'm trashing this movie, but the truth is, I don't really have a whole lot negative to say about it. I also have almost nothing positive to say about it either. One standout is the music from Ludwig Göransson. He is the best composer working in Hollywood today, and this movie has a score that's like often synth heavy. It evokes the exciting sort of 80s sci-fi film that I wish this movie would have been. Pedro Pascal plays stoic very well, as he always has, and Grogu is very cute, as he always is. Other than that, I was almost completely unmoved by this movie. I'll probably never watch it again, not because I hated it, but because I just don't care. Is this the goal for Star Wars? To make something so expected and unsurprising that it doesn't evoke much controversy or hatred, but also doesn't evoke a whole lot of love either? I hope not, because that is not the way Twice during the movie, there was an audible audience response in the theater that kind of sums up how I feel about this movie. It wasn't laughing or cheering, and it wasn't booing or sneering. It was the lyrical snoring of some poor soul 2 rows back from me that obviously had had enough and had drifted into his own galaxy far, far away. My body was able to stay conscious during The Mandalorian and Grogu, but I have to admit that my brain was more in tune with the snoring man behind me. So on my personal scale, I'm giving The Mandalorian and Grogu the barest of its fine scores, mainly because, again, it doesn't really even do anything interesting enough for me to say that I'm not a fan of it. I like Pedro Pascal. I like the character of Grogu. Like I said, Ludwig Göransson's music is good. The opening is good. So there's enough for me to say, yeah, okay, it's fine. But is that really the best we can do? So those are my thoughts on The Mandalorian and Grogu. What do you think? Were you more excited by this latest Star Wars adventure than I was? Am I just old and jaded and out of touch? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, stay tuned right here for the latest in movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe and may the Force be with you.